Welcome to the Hollywood Scholar. I'm Jed Morgan. And as always happens in Hollywood, when a woman starts to get a little bit older and is not as attractive as she believes that she used to be, she begins to call out the sexualization that she received in her younger years as sign of a protection against why it no longer happens in her current stage of life. And Scarlett Johansson has had comments like these before, but this is like her first overall explanation for why she believes that she was sexualized as a youth and is no longer now. But it's just coping like we've seen so many times. I'm very much of the opinion that it's okay to sexualize men, it's okay to sexualize women. It just depends on the context, and if it happens one way, happens another way, it's totally fine. But let's jump into these comments from Scarlett Johansson. So she believes that she was hypersexualized by Hollywood as a teenager because of her older looks. Now that doesn't necessarily make sense to me, because she said that she's no longer sexualized now that she's older, and she still looks really great. She does not look her age whatsoever. So if it was that she looks older, that makes her sexualized, but when she was younger, she also looked older, so she was sexualized. It doesn't exactly line up 100%, and it's just nonsense at the end of the day, because it's just cheap coping to come up with that she's no longer as attractive as she used to be. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. That's more her perception, and she's not getting as many sexualized roles, and she's becoming a real defined actress now, because Jojo Rabbit, she did a phenomenal job acting in that movie, and she wasn't sexualized. Sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, but she has a lot of interesting comments here. She believes that she was highly sexualized because of her older looks, which I still don't understand. I mean, she looked really young now, and she looked really young back then when she was doing a lot of those roles. And the interesting thing for me is when it's big budget movies and when it's, you're not as high of a star, you can kind of get an explanation for that. It's like, hey, it was the best opportunity she had, so she was willing to make some sacrifices. But after she hit Avengers fame, she still was doing independent movies like Under the Skin, and choosing to go fully nude in those movies, which was not necessary for her career whatsoever. She did not get paid in Under the Skin well enough to justify that as being like, hey, she's getting paid enough that she's willing to sacrifice some things. No, that was an independent movie that she decided to do. So Under the Skin and several other movies like that happened between the 2010s to the 2020s completely destroyed this argument, because that was 100% her decision and not explainable away by being a really good opportunity. Under the Skin, I don't think really anybody watched. So yeah, it's kind of destroyed by her own decisions that she made. And at the end of the day, that's what all this is about. When she was young and hot, she was making decisions that made her self-sexualized, and she enjoyed it. Those were her own decisions. But now that people don't want to sexualize her as much as they used to, she starts to feel bad about it, and self-conscious and self-respect comes into it. So she tries to degrade those decisions in the past and pretend that it wasn't her choice, and that makes herself feel better to a certain extent. And we've seen that time and time again. But she's obviously been one of the most sexualized actors in the last couple decades, so it's just focusing on this issue and this coping mechanism than we see in usual instances. But she goes on to say, I kind of became objectified and pigeonholed in this way where I felt like I was getting offers for work for things that I wanted to do. She wasn't getting offers. And again, those independent movies, she could have turned them down. She was not getting paid. And then she does other movies that aren't sexualized, like Jojo Rabbit. So there's not a whole lot of evidence for this. And it's just really weird. And I remember thinking to myself, I think people think I'm 40 years old. No, I don't think people think you're 40 now, let alone when you were in your early 20s and getting hypersexualized more than you are now. That doesn't make any sense. Everyone thinks she looks great and young for her age, always, for her entire career. So this is just some really weird comments to be like, oh yeah, they like hot older women, but I was young and looked hot and older. But now that I'm old and hot, I don't want to be that anymore. It doesn't compute. It does not track in any sort of logical manner. And her final comments here are, we live in a patriarchy, and I feel like there's a fundamental reality of women's condition that's always, even though 600 men are not actively, aggressively necessary as much as they need a minute ago, it's still fundamentally there. It's so baked into our culture and society, it's hard for me to imagine that ever being an element. If this were about patriarchy, if that were what was hypersexualizing her friend Chris Evans, at the same time that this is happening in her early career that she's referring to, and about the same age that they are because they're roughly the same age, he would not have been in movies like this. This was right about the same time as what she's referring to, and I would wager that this is way more sexualized than anything she did back in her early career when there's an explanation for it not really being her choice or being such a big role that she was willing to compromise a little bit. This isn't as bad as Under the Skin, but that was late enough in her career that that was 100% her own decision. This was one of his earliest roles. If it were about patriarchy, this wouldn't be a thing. If this were just about misogyny, sexualizing women, this would not be the case. This is her friend. And so all of her arguments can be soundly destroyed by that and by the classic shot that we all know from Iron Man 2, where she knows what she's doing and she loves it. Look, she is incredibly happy to know that they're all looking at her ass as she walks away. And that's okay. Sometimes women like to be sexualized. And if they're okay with it, it's okay for men to want to sexualize them. It's just this weird thing these days where it's bad to sexualize women and better than ever to sexualize men. Because out of the MCU main star actors, which of them have had shirtless scenes? Every man in every one of their movies, and she never has. Interesting. She wore a skin-tight outfit for most of it, but you can't say that's any less sexualizing than seeing Thor butt-ass naked in the newest Thor movie, Love and Thunder. They're pretty comparable. I think the Love and Thunder is way more sexualized than what the costumes that she normally wear. So it's a complete hypocritical double standard that Hollywood has, and that's where the direction has been going for several years with all of this. And it's just really kind of pathetic to see an older woman start to cope like this, like so many actresses do. And I don't think it's necessary because she still looks incredible and not look her age at all. She doesn't look like she's almost 40, even though she believes she did in her 20s, which is weird. So this is unnecessary cope that Hollywood puts on itself because she's starting to get different roles, getting offered roles that are no longer sexualized. So she believes she's not a sex icon like she used to be. And that's all Hollywood just going at it, thinking everything around sex. The audience isn't always thinking that way. So this is partially the culture of Hollywood, partly what people are telling her, and it's not always true. Sexualizing is okay when it's there, and it's okay if it's not there. And she made these decisions in her career, and that is proven so many times, and her excuse of patriarchy is disproven that men are doing these things, and the Marvel superheroes in the actual Marvel movies, the men are just as much, if not more, sexualized than the female characters in the MCU, and that's been the case since the beginning, not just the newest Phase 4 stuff. So this is just par for the course for female actors when they get a little bit older, and it's kind of sad to see it coming from her, and her sexuality is what made her career, and that's not a bad thing. A lot of people, most Hollywood actors, are famous because they're hot. And that's okay. They act like sexuality is such a painful, such a horrific thing these days, but it's not. It's okay when it's there, and it's okay when it's not there. If you're famous for being hot, that's okay. You think Chris Evans is famous for being a great actor? He's a little bit one note. It's because he's hot, and that's okay. But with the changing feminist environment in Hollywood, with her getting older and not getting offered the same roles by Hollywood, the audience is totally okay with still her taking those old roles that she used to. It's a double standard, it's hypocrisy, and easily disproven, and honestly nonsensical with a whole 40-year-old thing. It's really sad to see it coming from her at this time, but it's nothing that we haven't seen many, many times before. But anyway, that's all I have for today. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Anon. If you like what I do here and want to see good, compelling stories that Hollywood will no longer give you, check out my book series, Odyssey of a Phoenix, a mythological epic about philosophy, morality, and modern-day mental illness issues. Books 1, Down in Flames, and Book 2, Apocalypse Then, currently on sale. Book 3, Kill the Dark, coming soon.